Sorry, oh, you forgot.
Well, I wasn't here to turn
Sorry. Okay, so other than that, yeah, we're having a look at a bit more closely at that benchmark, and also unplanned staff absences. Well, obviously you'd expect that there were unplanned absences with people going off to get COVID tests and so forth. Other than that, there's commentary throughout the document, and we're in pretty good shape with how I describe it.
Good to hear. Any questions, councillors? Comments?
Sorry, I was just going to put in context to councillors. Most councillors don't do this. We've deliberately now quarterly for review now, both of this and our budget review, which is unusual, just to get the timing right. Otherwise, by the time you get the annual report after the audit's done, you're not actually getting the end of the 19-20 year wrap up until September, October, in which case you're already 4 months into the new financial year before you've looked back and seen what you finished off this year. So we do this as an extra deliberately, and it does mean there's some duplication because you'll see largely the same again when it flows through to the final end. That was the only comment. And the only other thing I would add to what Margaret mentioned, just with those few items that are behind, there's a few of those are also, as you would expect, delivery plans established for matters beyond council's control. So things like Bradfield Park, where we're now having the issue over land and contamination. The Department of Transport, trying to put pressure on the Department of Transport to pay for it. That one. The other one that comes to mind is the resurfacing of the North Sydney Oval, resurfacing of one of our facilities, which post COVID, and we're not proceeding with that at this time. We've managed to rest.
Ken, how extensive is that contamination at Bradfield Park?
There's fairly extensive contamination right around the harbour. So I mean, it's not an issue as long as you don't dig it up. But as soon as you start to, that's my understanding, as soon as you start to do work on it, then you're digging it up, or you're doing any changes, and you've got to remediate to current standards.
So it's not as if it was a tip once, or
is it lead in the bridge?
Yeah, it's lead. Yeah, well, pretty well. Most of Sydney Harbour, around all our nice foreshores, were all industrial sites, at one stage or another, or had industrial fill placed on them. So they all contain some level of predominantly lead or oil.
Anderson's the same.
Yeah, they're all.
Anderson.
When
that playground went in, I had very young kids at the time, and I lobbied. I didn't think it's a great place for playground, and all the tests came back as 100% fine.
The one that's in Bradfield Park.
Yeah, this is just this is just a little bit further around. It's at the western side where we go to do stage one of remediation. And of course, just to remind councillors, it's also where we were having a debate with the Department of Transport. The Department of Transport slowed us doing the work, so they wouldn't sign off the development application, even though we believe it was under our care and control. So they were saying, no, they own it, and they won't sign off on it until all these things were done. In the interim, we found out that there was contamination that had to be. So we said, well, great, you own it, you can fix it.
Oh, there you go.
So that's where it's sitting at the moment.
And I thought too, when they did the parks and that, there was a period, and I don't know if it's called bluestone, but there was something that they laid as a base that was considered a contamination now anyway, as a matter of course, a base for that sort of reclaimed park area. So we're sort of finding something that was part of what they did in the day. Margaret, are you across HR too?
I am now.
Good. Congratulations. Just a general question, how is everyone holding up mentally?
We, look, I think staff morale has been quite positive, actually. So, there's been a real feel of, and I think it is a bit like a family in North Sydney, there's been a real feeling of support for one another throughout the organisation. I think we put in quite early some really good policy and strategies around how we would handle COVID. And we've got some really strong communication and very clear communication going out through our pandemic annex meeting that we established. And we've been very equitable as well about how we've rolled out the arrangements in terms of the working from home and working at the office. So I'm actually quite impressed with the staff. I think that some of the individual business units, for instance, customer service, staying open, wine to service the residents, and there've been IT and some of those others have really shone. So I think it's been pretty good.
Because I think a lot of people, my observation is, a lot of people just forget that these are units where they go and have a coffee together normally, they can have lunch together. All that social structure's been taken away, but they're still doing the job. So
we've had some very clever some clever social things as well. So we've had things like online trivia, as a social thing. And
see, I didn't know that. So
we've had some of those type of things, and online raffles and engagement as well in some of the things that Commons does. So we found other ways to engage with our staff, and also the newsletters that we send out. So it's actually been quite interesting. I thought that morale would take a dive, possibly if everyone's so stressed out and that there might be arguments breaking out across the organisation, but it hasn't panned out that way at all.
And most back, or are they still?
We've got a high percentage back. As it improved, we had a staged approach for staff coming back. We do have some rotation still, where we might have a team A, team B. So just rotating to keep some of the key people separate from others. But we definitely have more back than we did with the worst of
we always maintained at least 50% at home, 50% of that work. And one of the things that worked well from, I believe, early on, well, a couple of things. One is the library staff were excellent, and that's the only section other than North Sydney Olympic Hall where we brought forward the redundancies, but most of those got redeployed anyway. The library was the only one that really got closed down. People effectively got sent home from a JobKeeper or our equivalent of it under the Splinter Award, and they actually responded very well. So spoke to them all personally. Rebecca has done a great job as well supported. So they've been good. We had a couple of challenges early on when you had people that wanted to push it. So some people didn't want to come in and work at all. And we won a couple of minor points there with a couple of staff. Some staff we allowed for that to occur for specific reasons, their risk factors or specific situation and the jobs they were doing. But a couple of others we didn't. We said, no, you have to do the same. You have to do the same shift work as everyone else, otherwise you put pressure on your colleague. It's unfair. And there was only a couple of them, but when we got those across the line, then everybody was comfortable. And you tend to find that here in this organisation. If somebody thinks that somebody's getting something extra or being allowed to do something, but we're not, then everybody gets upset. And if everyone thinks, well, that's fair, and their lights. Is that fair, Reed?
It's just human nature.
I
know it's a
Sounds like family life, really.
And we have, it's probably too much operational detail, but we had our first home workplace health and safety incident during the week. We had one of our senior planners, very simple, apparently stood up, sneezed, fell over, and broke a vertebrae in the back of his neck. What? And he was due to come out of hospital. Gavin Commons.
Gavin Commons.
So
he just fell, tripped over, and what did he hit his head?
Just actually trip over anything.
I've only got very brief details, but apparently sneezed, fainted or something, fell backwards and just fell awkwardly.
They had to operate.
I don't know about operating. I think he damaged a vertebrae in his neck. We'll find out what he is due to be released from hospital.
I thought you were going to say trip over the cat or something like that.
That would have made sense, but it didn't actually trip over.
No, it was just one of those
freak things.
Freak simplifications, apparently.
All right, any more discussion?
No, it's fine.
Yep, happy to move.
Drummond, second move. Good, we now go to page 65, the quarterly budget review. Does anyone want a
Colleague?
yes, come and
Oh, you can go back, yeah. Kathy went back. Darren, number of times.
As Ken mentioned earlier in the meeting, we prior to last year, we never used to do a June budget review. But we've decided to, as from last year, start doing them. And I've mentioned in the report that we're still in the process of processing various entries and finalising the financial statements. We're scheduled for audit at the end of the month. So essentially this report really is just to give you some idea of what the likely year-end result is going to be. And we're forecasting an operating surplus of just under $4.9 million. That's including capital grants and contributions. If we take off capital grants and contributions, the net operating surplus is, it's a net operating deficit of $6 million. It's the figure that we normally look at. It's a deterioration on what we were forecasting at the end of March. The main reason for that is a non-cash item. With the pool redevelopment, the auditors are asking us to accelerate depreciation on the site. It still has a book value, and because we're going to be demolishing the site, we need to write that book value off. So it means booking about an extra $6 million of depreciation for 2019, more than what we expected. So that's what's caused that deficit. In fact, had it have not been for that, we would have been close to breaking even, excluding capital grants and contributions. In the June quarter, revenue wasn't as bad as what we were forecasting. Obviously with the pool reopening, the library reopening, and then parking meters and parking stations, the takings from those picked up, particularly in the month of June. So we ended up with a bit more revenue than what we were expecting.
Is that pickup continuing?
It has continued in July and today in August, yeah. So, yeah, it's still not back to pre-COVID-19 levels by any sense, but
what
it's
sort of percentage of would it be at? 75, maybe?
Yeah, it's probably around the 70% mark. With parking, it dropped down to about 10%.
Yeah.
Then picked up. So yeah.
So we're back to about 70%.
I think it's around about that. I haven't actually got
That's a
figures
pretty good
at the
comeback,
moment.
isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know if there's any. Is there any other questions if you've read the report?
I was just wondering if we had a $4 million surplus, what it would have been without COVID.
Yeah, it
And with that,
probably would have been up around the 7 to 8. Hadn't been without COVID. Yeah. But then that would have been including capital grants and contributions, which are nearly $11 million.
Well, a good result under the circumstances. Any more discussion, questions?
and you're not seeing anything.
I think probably we assumed that the impact of COVID would be felt for 6 months this financial year, and that things would pick up from January 1 onwards. I'm not convinced that's going to actually be the case. That the impact could linger on into the second half of the financial year. That's certainly one
The
thing.
Victorian situation.
Yeah, we can blame Victoria for that.
We can.
Yeah.
I'm blaming them for everything, mate.
That's a significant difference.
Why not?
And it even links back to the question earlier about staff.
Yes.
The fact is that staff were starting to come back,
Yeah.
and then effectively a hold has been put. And I think that's what's happening for all businesses. And our waiving lease fees, etc., for cafes, restaurants, and other tenants, which of course we had quite a good policy, and it's worked well. We've only lost one tenant, and that's at Jago's Cafe over the road here. Everyone else has been returning. However, this apparently the feedback I'm starting to get is really on a lot of businesses. So where things were starting to turn back to normal, suddenly the numbers, and you only have to go through North Sydney during the day to see it.
People are nervous again.
Yeah,
They're nervous again.
And
They're
possibly
staying home on the
possibly even
weekend.
more nervous.
Yeah.
Well, they've seen the wildfire of Victoria.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's,
You know, that's the potential of this, and they just thought.
People aren't eating out. Even the little villages are quiet on the weekends.
So the flow-on impact that that type of thing may cause from obviously a lot of our activity, particularly car parking charges and the like, but also I expect that there's a high potential of people, our lease tenants around our property portfolio coming back on hardship, reduced turnover, and of course there's still a policy in place that came from the federal government down to the states about capacity through to the end of September. Tenancy arrangements, strongly encouraging you to liaise and negotiate, advise rents or lease payments based on impact on turnover. So I think they'll continue to flow than what we would have thought 4 weeks ago before the Victoria situation. Thank you.
Are you expecting the changes to the solvency law to have any impact at the end of September? Meaning, do you think there's a hidden problem that's going to come through?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I couldn't comment. And the other concern for us are the ones that have been raised, and that's the flow-on impacts of a number of these temporary legislative changes. So we know, for example, and we'll find out shortly what the first lot of impact is. We know that effectively there's no interest charge or penalty for people not paying their rates before the end of the year. We normally have around 60% of our payers pay up front. So how that impacts on that for our cash flow is to be seen. Of course, the other large change is the change to the payment of infrastructure charges, where for a window of time, infrastructure charges payable on occupational certificate rather than at the commencement of the project, and that has a potential to impact us severely. So those couple of things.
It's not what you can do about it.
No. Any other comments?
No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Have a mover. Councillor Drummond and Councillor Brown. Good. Now we go to page.
I think you've got Lindsay waiting to come in.
Oh, he's not here.
Page 60.
Is it Lindsay?
He'll have to wait.
Page 69.
I think, this is,
Yep. Investments and loan borrowings
yeah.
as of 31st of July 2020.
I think that issue,
Straight to the-
sorry, Mayor, I have to say a few words.
Yeah.
I think the question of cash flow, which is we're talking about the payment of rates and so forth. Obviously, the cash flowing into the organisation is going to have an impact on investment returns to the extent that the timing of the investment money and getting it onto investment will have an impact. One of the things that I just do want to point out to council is that we're fortunate that if you recall, we had a presentation from investment advisors and they were talking about how North Sydney was better placed than most councils with regards to its returns. That's continued, and it's continued because a lot of our investments are being over the longer term. We're not holding all our investments in short term, 3-6 months, where we're having to roll them all the time, and therefore when you roll them, if the interest rates are falling, obviously you're moving into a lower rate situation. So that's helped hold our investment returns together in a better way than perhaps some of the other councils have fared. And indeed, is mentioned in the report from the investors on page 76 and others. And there's a bit of a flavour through that document. I think that we're not overly concerned about the investments. We have cashed in a couple of our investments, and we've made quite a bit of money on those floating notes. But other than that, yeah, I'm happy to take questions. And that's the important.
There's no point in giving the ratepayers some sort of incentive, like electricity. If you pay it by a certain date, you get $90.
We do that. Don't we have our rate for?
We don't charge it. Most of our rent payers would pay. Something like 80% would pay when it's due. So we did debate whether we should I think there was a talk even with council whether we should offer some incentive, and I think that we basically decided that wasn't necessary for us to follow. And I think it may have been, my memory serves me, Councillor Baker was pointing out that even in the GFC situation, we didn't have our ratepayers defaulting to anywhere near the level that we thought that they would. So I think that was debated and decided.
I'm thinking mostly of the businesses that are going to be able to not pay. If we said to them, look, you'll get 20% off if you do pay.
Well, we can't do that because we don't actually have the authority to do that under legislation. So historically, the only thing we've done as an incentive is we used to have a prize draw. And we ceased doing that because at the end of the day, it had a little bit of interest apparently when it was first brought in, because it was something new, but over time it became largely irrelevant.
No, big prizes too.
Well, at the beginning, were they?
Well,
the
last time we
prizes
did it,
dropped off.
like it was full.
Do you remember that?
Prizes?
$25,000.
Oh,
It was $25,000. It was 5 people picked out for $5,000.
That's right.
Oh, if you pay your rate.
Let's keep our 25,000.
Yeah, but we kept the 25.
Or just dinner with the mayor or something.
Without price.
But it was all. But in New South Wales, it's predominantly done in reverse. That if you don't pay on time, then you pay an interest penalty. Of course, we've got the option. People don't have to pay their 12 months up front. They can pay quarterly if they wish. But of course, this year, because the interest, if you don't pay on time, has been reduced to zero until the end of this calendar year, is effectively no penalty. Now, we're not out there overly promoting.
Yeah, does anyone know about that?
No, but it's going to be really interesting to see
Businesses will.
Yeah.
to see what actually
So it will be
in
interesting
terms
to
of
see
social
that.
behaviour rather than how we run the council.
Yeah.
Residential rates are still so low, but they're not huge compared to your occupants.
So I was just searching for ways to compensate for this delay.
So we'll see how that goes.
Other questions? No. Statements?
Thank you.
I'm happy to move it. Okay, I'll second it.
Councillor Bowden, second it. All in favour? Good. Page 93 is the finish. That's it. Well done. Record, how long did that take?
Steve. Thank you, mate.
Thank you. Now, we've got a couple of...
Oh, read those.
While we're on it, which